There. Hey, so Merry Christmas. It's coming up, right? It's getting there. It's close. The lights are up. You can tell it's the season. But there's one thing I know for sure. No matter how many times you've been to church in your life, you probably, if you're here around the Christmas season, you expect to hear something about the nativity scene or the Christmas story or Joseph and Mary. You know all these elements. You probably even know, if you maybe you've never been to church, but you probably know there was an angel involved. You just saw that in the skit, and maybe you knew that there was a star or some wise men somewhere along the way. But the interesting thing is, for most of us, culture and the stories have gotten so mixed up. You ever play that game as a kid, telephone, where you sit in a circle and somebody whispers something in your ear and it goes all the way around the circle and it comes back and it never comes back like exactly what the person said initially? That's kind of how the Christmas story has gotten with us. I want to show you something real quick. Matthew, in his second chapter of his little account of the life of Jesus, he writes about the wise men. And I want you to see something, because for most of us, we have a picture of the way the Christmas story went. Watch this. When they saw the star, talking about the wise men, it says they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house. See, most of us have these little manger scenes by our trees, or if you have one, or you've seen a picture of one. And the wise men are always where? They're at the stable. They're never at the house. The story, there's so many unexpected elements in this story, mostly because we think we know it. We've heard it over and over, or we at least hear it repeated in the background, or we've seen some movies about it or some shows, but we've kind of gotten away from what really happened. There are some things in this story that are very, very unexpected. Jesus actually stayed in the place he was born for a couple of years, we know. He was there because, just like today, anybody, I know several people, Sarah and Josh this morning, come in with a new baby, and you come in with a new baby, what? You feel like you're bringing the whole house, right? Like, it's not easy to travel with a new, brand new baby child of any kind. So Jesus and his parents, they stayed right there for a little while because it was too hard to travel with a baby off in the distance going somewhere. Let's go back to last week for just a second. We started by looking at Matthew's account. Matthew tells the story of Jesus a little differently than Luke. He starts with this list. I told you there were 51 names in 16 verses. Why? Because he told his story to a mostly Jewish audience, and this is what the Jewish people would have known. That if somebody was going to claim to be the Son of God, they would have to fit a very certain formula. They would have to come from the line of King David. You had to be born within King David's line, or there was no way you could ever be the Messiah. God had told them to watch for the Messiah from the line of King David. So he starts listing people. And very quickly, it becomes this shocking list. I told you it was shocking. He put the names of 4 women in there. Now, don't throw stones at me. This is just what he did because that fit their culture, right? We wouldn't do that today, right? We understand that it takes a mom and a dad to make a baby, but they wouldn't have listed the women in this story, and they certainly wouldn't have listed them in this important list. They would have just used the names of men. But he used the names of some of the moms. And when he did, he used the names of moms that when the hearers heard it, because they didn't all have a copy of the scriptures, when the hearers heard it, they would have heard the name of that woman, like Tamar, who we're going to look at today, and they would have thought, oh, that girl. There was something shocking to that story. So Matthew made sure that as he told the lineage of Jesus, that he proved that the 1,000-year-old prophecy was correct, that Jesus came from the line of King David, that he could be the Son of God, that he was the Son of God. He told it to verify the story, to validate what was happening. But he made sure to tell it in such a way that the mess was brought into it. They were reminded of sin that was a part of their family tree. They were reminded of how they continued to rebel against God. Because without it, think of your family. Think of maybe your Thanksgiving meal with all the relatives around. If Jesus had been born into your family, you know you've got relatives who would be sitting around doing this kind of thing, right? Like, hey, what more can we do for the world? Like, we're done. Like, we brought the Messiah came through our family tree. Like, we kind of done enough for this world right now. Like, that's going to be the story, right? So Matthew included all of the mess to keep them humble, right? To remind us not to be arrogant. And here's what we discovered last week, that the gospel is this unexpected invitation to an unexpected guest, and guess what? You and I are those guests. It's an unexpected invitation, not because God was taken by surprise. God knew what was going on. We're the ones who were unexpecting. We did not expect this kind of grace. We did not expect this kind of mercy. We did not expect this kind of story. And so Matthew opens last week, and we got to catch a glimpse of why he was telling the gospel that way. That Jesus really is the good news. He's the good news because he did it all, right? And we can't do anything for ourselves. I want to push this a little bit further this week, and we're going to go back to Matthew. We're going back to the lineage. I know some of you are going, look, I never knew you could get this much out of a list of names. But you can, because there's some other unexpected elements I want you to see. So go to Matthew 1, verse 1 again, and let's pick it back up. It says, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac the father of Jacob, and Jacob was the father of Judah and his brothers. Okay, listing of women, shocking. Listing of the names, though, also contain some shocking evidence in them. When we get to Judah, circle Judah if you've got a pen. I want you to remember him because Judah is one of 12 boys. So he's got 11 brothers. And here's the thing. I'm going to give you a family tree in just a second on the screen. We're going to walk this through because this gets messier than any daytime soap opera you have ever watched in your life. But Judah is the brother that's named where the line of Jesus would come through. It's totally different than what you would have thought. Reuben was the oldest boy. In their culture, the oldest came with a little bit more clout. He had a little bit more of a role of importance in the family. It wasn't because he was better, but it was just it was a title. It was a place of honor to be the firstborn. Reuben was the firstborn. A guy named Joseph was the lastborn. He was the youngest. You probably know him. He had a coat of a lot of colors, and there have been stories told about him and even movies made about him. But those are the two guys, but they weren't chosen. Judah was chosen. Let's pick up the story in Genesis 37. I want to take you all the way back to the beginning and show you how it folds in to this Christmas story. Verse 37, Genesis 37, verse 3. Now Israel, okay, I put in your notes the word Jacob. This is Jacob. God has changed his name. So you need to know that. If you haven't read the Bible a lot, if you didn't know that part, it's okay. But sometimes God will change somebody's name to mark something important happening in their life. He changes Jacob's name to Israel. So here it goes. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. Okay, let's go straight to the family tree cliff notes. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to line this out for you. So you have Abraham. Abraham's married to Sarah. Abraham and Sarah have Isaac. Isaac gets married to Rebekah. Rebekah and Isaac have Jacob. He becomes Israel, and he marries Rachel. This is the beginning of the family tree. It's pretty simple, but hang on because it doesn't stay simple. Next slide. Jacob is going to have 12 sons. One of them is Judah, plus 11 other brothers. The oldest will be named Reuben. The youngest will be Joseph. He's got a coat of many colors, and his daddy likes him the best. Are we up to speed? You with me? You're going to have to stay awake on this one. Verse 4. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him, Joseph, more than all the other brothers, they hated him. They could not speak peacefully to him. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. These brothers are developing this strong hatred towards this youngest boy, Joseph. He was kind of favored a lot by his dad. They didn't like that. He got more, presents than they did. Maybe they thought that. He got a coat that was apparently really expensive. And then you add to all of that this other thing that happens, that God seems to be doing something in his life. And he's having these dreams, and God's talking to him about things. And he's not really exercising a lot of caution. And so he goes and shares his stories, his dreams with his brothers. And I don't know if he was bragging. He probably was a little bit. You can just imagine they started hating him. Anybody have brothers or sisters, right? Anybody the oldest? Oh, nobody wants to admit it. Now, see, I'm the oldest. And when I became an adult, I discovered my siblings called me the golden child. Now, My parents are in the second row, and they will tell you some things about like the golden child is not that I was a horrible guy or a horrible teenager or kid, but I definitely wasn't the golden child, right? But sometimes what's natural? Sibling rivalry is natural, right? Like sibling rivalry is just part of life. It happens. Here's the story though. One day, these brothers find themselves in a position to actually do something about their sibling rivalry. Jacob, Israel, is going to send Joseph off to check on his older brothers. He's sending the youngest to check on the 11. The 11 are out tending the flocks, taking care of the dad's sheep, goats, whatever, and they're in the field. Joseph is probably carrying supplies. He gets ready, and he goes off. Now, I'm intrigued by this. This tells me that Joseph understands he's the favorite. He goes into the field, and he decides that going into the field to check on his older brothers, he needs to wear his coat of many colors because he needs to look really fly in the field, right? Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and they threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. I like that. It's just kind of like, just stay with me. He didn't drown. Verse 25. Then they sat down to eat. Huh? Like think about this for just a second. Sometimes we think the story in the Bible is so clean that there's something so holy about it that is not touchable. I love this. These are brothers. They're having trouble with their younger brother. In fact, they kind of hate him. They've got some sibling rivalry going on. They don't understand everything that's going on. And he shows up to check on them, and what do? Somewhere along the way, they quickly thought, we're just going to throw him in this pit. Now, can I say something? First of all, everything in the Bible is not everything you should do in life. Don't ever do this, okay? So I feel like I need to say that, okay? It's like this. I saw this warning sign this week. Put this up of a warning sign you can find on chainsaws. Look at this. Don't hold the wrong end of the chainsaw. I feel a little silly that you have to put that on a chainsaw. Like if you have to put that, like maybe you shouldn't be messing with a chainsaw to begin with. But just in case, so we don't go too far, don't do any of this. Don't do any of this. If you've got a sibling, if you're a teenager, don't get any ideas off of this. But think about it. They threw him in a pit. They went to Burger King. They sat down and they had lunch. And they left him there. They committed to something. What happens if they pull that younger brother out and let him go? He's going straight back to dad. They're in trouble. They're done for. They've committed to this whole thing. Verse 25, let's pick it up in the middle. And looking up, they, the brothers that aren't in the pit, saw this caravan of Ishmaelites coming in from Gilead. And on their camels, they had their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh. They were going to sell their goods on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers instead listened to him. Don't sell him, or don't just kill him. His blood will be on us. Instead, let's sell him, then we can get some money from him. Think about the amount of hate that's going through the system of these brothers right now. Think about Judah. He's not the oldest. He's definitely not the youngest. The youngest is in the pit. But he must have enough clout that the brothers are listening to him. Let's sell him. Let's sell him into slavery. And then for the next 20 years, we're going to keep this secret. We're going to cover it up. We're going to tell our mom and dad that he was killed out in the field. We found his robe and he's gone from this earth. But we know he's not. And for 20 years, they're going to tell that lie, and they're going to tell it, and they're not going to feel bad about it, at least not bad enough to correct it. And every anniversary, when it comes around, when the parents discovered that their son was dead, they're going to have to relive that, because when somebody dies and you lose a child, it's not just a single event, right? It marks your life forever. And they're going to mark that for the rest of their lives, and the brothers are going to keep the secret, right? Joseph's a whole other story we won't get to today, but if you follow Joseph's life, you'll see him. He becomes a slave. He becomes a prisoner at some point. He's in prison several times. And eventually, though, he gets this really important title, and he becomes the food production and distribution. He basically manages all the food that's moving through Egypt, especially as they go into a famine. And at some point, if you don't know the story, Joseph gets an opportunity. His 11 brothers come in front of him because during the famine, they need food. And they wind up in front of him, and they don't know who he is, and he didn't expect them to be there. And Joseph forgives his brothers. He's in a place of power. He's in a place of position. He could have done away with his brothers. His dad would have never known. He could have kept it a secret. He could have executed all kinds of judgment. And in Joseph, listen to me, here's why I question why Matthew talked about Judah. Here's why I want to ask God, why Judah? Why his line? Why not Joseph? Because when Joseph forgave his brothers, he became this picture of Jesus for us. This unexpected forgiveness, this grace and mercy that just flowed out of him. Joseph really was the better son. Now, the story's going to go from bad right now to really creepy. We're going to leave Joseph alone. I want to take you back to Judah for just a second. Give me the next family tree cliff notes. What's going to happen is Judah moves on with his life, right? He gets married and has these 3 boys. Those 3 boys will eventually get married as well. In fact, the oldest will get married first, and he's going to marry a young girl by the name of Tamar. Give me the next slide. We're going to put Tamar in. She's pink just because. And Tamar marries and here's where the scriptures are really vague again, because it says that did evil in the sight of God, and so he died. That's all it says. We don't know what he did. We don't know how he died. We just know that he did evil, and somehow, for some reason, God removed him from the picture. In this culture, again, this is not us, and it's going to feel a little weird for us, but in this culture, if a son married a woman and he died, leaving her alone, his other brother, his next closest brother, would be the one to marry her. Because in this culture, a woman was nothing but a piece of property. She had no rights, she had no rules, or no law kept her safe, and she would literally starve to death on the streets. So when you married into a family, if you didn't have children, the next brother in line, give me the next slide, Onan is going to step up, and he's going to be the brother that takes Tamar. His whole role with Tamar is to give her children, and they were to be the children of his brother who died, not his kids, right? Even though they are his kids. And they would be there for their mother going forward. It was a safety net. It sounds weird. I don't recommend you try it, but this is what was happening, right? And as they do that, Onan does something evil too. In fact, it says he did evil in the sight of God. And we know from the story, I'm going to leave it PG rated at least this morning, we know from the story that he did not do what he was supposed to do, and he would not give her kids. And so he dies. And give me the next slide. What's going to happen is she's going to be sent away to grieve. Basically, Jacob says, look, Judah says, you go grieve and wait for my youngest son, Selah, and when he's of age, then I will give him to you. Now, what happens next, we should already know. What did Judah do? For over 20 years, he's kept a secret. He told his dad that his youngest brother was dead. He did away with him. He just forgot about him. It seems pretty easy. And we're going to see Judah do the same thing here. It's interesting because you think we're in a small town. They didn't live in a town like we live in. So he would have seen Tamar about town. He would have known that she was there. He had promised her he was going to give the youngest boy when the youngest boy was of marrying age, but he forgot totally about it. He left her alone. Now, I told you, the story goes from bad to creepy, and now it's going to go from creepy to Jerry Springer worthy, okay? This is just Jerry Springer worthy right here. Tamar basically takes everything in her own hands. She tries to figure out a way to fix this situation, and what she does is she dresses up as a prostitute. In our culture, we have a little trouble understanding because that doesn't necessarily mean the same thing it did then, but there were certain ways they would dress, especially with head coverings, that would distinguish a woman if she was a prostitute. She would go, and temple prostitution was very popular. It was common, and it was accepted at the time. So she might sit out here on Greenville, where all these churches are, where all the temples would have been at the time. And you would drive up and down the street, not you, hopefully, but somebody would have driven up and down the street, and you would have petitioned one of these prostitutes. Again, I'm trying to leave it PG rated. Along comes Judah. He strikes up a conversation with Tamar, doesn't know it's Tamar, and they strike a deal. Now, ladies, I don't understand this deal. I'm just going to leave it with you. But basically, the deal is this. She'll take him in to her services for a baby goat. I don't get it, but that's what it was, a baby goat. Only problem is, Judah didn't have a baby goat at the time. So he said to her, what can I do? She said, I tell you what, give me the signet ring around your neck. It was a ring that would have, in fact, acted like his signature. It was on a little chain, a rope around his neck. And give me your staff. It was a sign of power in their culture. Give me those two things. And when you send the baby goat the next day, I'll take the baby goat. You have these two things back. Now, I have petitioned Hallmark. I really think this would be a great Hallmark movie. I'll let you know what they say to me. But basically, can you just imagine the tension of this in your family? That when you gather the next time at a holiday event, the story comes up, hey, you remember that time that Dad slept with our dead brothers, two of our dead brothers' wife? This is an unbelievable story. And yet, in the middle of all of this, God's going to redeem something. Watch this. If you can imagine, Tamar becomes pregnant. Tamar becomes pregnant. In a small town, it's tough to hide, right? And so as she starts to show, some people run to Judah, right? They're going to Judah. They're saying, hey, look at this. Your daughter-in-law, she shamed the family. She's bringing shame on your people. And you know what happens? You ever had somebody in your life that gets really outspoken about some certain issue, only a few years later to find they are participating in that very issue? And I'm not going to go political this morning, but I could go pastoral as well. Right? Does a pastor come to mind, a famous pastor that kind of preached heavily against some certain sin, something that they said God doesn't love, God doesn't favor in your life, only to find out they were doing that very thing all along? Because so many times we ignore the self-righteousness of our own hearts. And so many times, be honest, the things we preach so much against are the very things we struggle with, and we don't want to be honest about that. And what happens next is Judah becomes this very, very self-righteous, holier-than-thou person. And he says, bring my daughter-in-law out. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to burn her. Now again, in their culture, her sin, she would have removed herself from even being put in a court of law. This would have been punishable immediately. And when they say burning, I don't want to get too much into it. It's not healthy. But when they say burning, it was not a burning of her whole body in a fire. It was using a way to burn her from the inside. It was a horrible way to die. And he's the one who slept with her, and he doesn't even know it. So what happens? She sends a messenger, and she says, you know what? You're right. You're right, I'm pregnant, and here's who I'm pregnant. Now, this is the part I think would fold right into a Hallmark movie, because you could see this coming a mile away. Here's who I'm pregnant by, and she sends the ring and the rod. Verse 26, then Judah identified them, and he said, she is more righteous than I, since I did not give her to my son Selah, and he did not know her again. In the last slide, slide 8, and Tamar added 2 more children to the line. In the line of Judah, not Reuben, not Joseph, the one who is an image of Jesus, not the other brothers. Judah is the line that our Savior came through. That's part of the family story. That's part of the lineage. It's part of the things that, just like you and I, if this was in my family, we would not sit around and talk about this at the holidays. This is something you want to forget about your great-great-great-great-grandfather and what he might or might not have done to your family, right? We don't tell those stories because we want to tell the success stories. But God chose Judah. Not the oldest, the most natural, not the youngest, the one who's more of a picture of Jesus. He chose Judah. And Matthew chose to mention Judah, by the way. Matthew could have just said, he could have just mentioned Judah by name and then gone on with it. He didn't even have to mention Tamar, but he does, and he brings us back to the story. Why? Because this story is the point. That the birth of Jesus in this story declares something that you and I want to be front and center of our lives. That your only hope has nothing to do in this world, has nothing to do with what you've done, and everything to do with what's been done for you. That's the story. Joseph was a picture of the Savior, and Jesus said, no, we're not going to, or God said, we're not going to use him for that line, right? We're going to use Judah. Why? Because Judah's a picture of you and I. Judah's a picture of us. He's a picture of the number of times that we rebel against God. We push away from God. We chase the creation instead of the Creator. And we go back on our words. We lie. We cheat. It's part of the reason that we don't like the Bible sometimes, because, you know why? The power of God outs us with the Bible. The Holy Spirit reveals things in us, and it makes us squirm just a little bit. But can I tell you something? The good news, the great news that I think for some reason we've lost a little bit, the great news is not that you could do anything to better your life. Look, we all know that we can take a class somewhere. We can improve our life skills. We can improve our communication skills. We can go take a marriage class. We can go to counseling. We can improve ourselves in this world. But the great news is the thing that you and I both know. The thing that there's still something evil within us. There's still this bad side of us. There's still this breakdown where we disobey God even though we say we don't want to. That we've got some secrets, and some of them really, really dark. Right? We've got some deep regrets. We've got some embarrassing moments. And the great news is this. It's okay. You don't have to perform your way into heaven. You don't have to live up to it perfectly, because you never will in this life. Your only hope has nothing to do with what you've done, what you could do, what you might do, what you haven't done in the past. Your only hope has to do with what has been done for you, and that is great news. So whatever the secret is, whatever the dark thing that you carry with you, whatever the embarrassing moment, this is the safe place. This is where we know the gospel, the truth, the good news, that we're all covered by the same grace. It's why we don't judge. Look, the Bible never says that we shouldn't talk to each other, confront each other about our sins. It never says that. The problem is that we've taken that, and some of us in our self-righteous and holier-than-thou ways, we've addressed other people wanting to point out their sins without ever recognizing the grace of God in our lives and how we are covered by the same love. When we talk to each other, when we walk together here, walking with God, we should speak with love. Love grounded in grace and mercy that reminds us that none of us are worthy. There's nothing I could have done. I could not be the best golden child enough to earn my way into heaven, which my siblings will verify. But you don't have to either. There's nothing you could have done. It's all about what's been done for you, and that is the reason Matthew focuses on this lineage so much. Let me pray for us.